Hey guys, welcome back to XICups. So as some of you might remember from the previous video, the Wilson's kettle that we had on the channel a couple months back has been discontinued or has been taken off the shelf by Amazon. I really like that kettle. I thought that was a great alternative for anybody who's looking for something similar to a Fellow EKG. Nonetheless, after I noticed that it was taken off the shelf, I decided to shop around for another alternative. And today I just received a package. So once again, the thing that I'm looking for in a alternative to the EKG is again something that is relatively cheaper than the Fellow EKG and has a similar aesthetics, function, as well as power. With that said, let's get this package open and see if this is a worthy alternative. All right, so the option that I ended up choosing is made by a company called Ovalware, and this is their RJ3 electric pour-over kettle. Just quickly, a rundown on the specs. So this kettle is rated at 1000 watts, and more importantly, you're able to set the target temperature as well as holding it there as you are making the brew. Other ways that is a little bit similar to the Fellow EKG, it have a stopwatch if you choose to use it. Of course, there's also the Fahrenheit and Celsius toggle, just in case if you prefer one over the other. The kettle itself does claim to be very precise. I did read some reviews on Amazon when I was going over this purchase. Overall, the review seems to be pretty good for this particular kettle. However, a full disclaimer is that I did not go on YouTube to look for any reviews made by anybody else. And I do it this way for most of the products that I try out myself, is so that I can form my own opinion and share those opinions with you guys. All right, let's get this box open and see what's inside. So far, the box is a very clean design. It's very simple. The print on the box itself is nothing too fancy, which actually I'm perfectly fine with. Once you open it, you're greeted with some marketing material, and this looks like a little raffle that you can enter to get some future discounts. And of course, some Pourover instruction guide as well as the user manual. Looks like the lid. And we got it in the matte black option. And that looks like everything that's in the box. So one thing straight away I want to mention is that this kettle does come in two color options. One of them is a silver color, the other one is a matte black color. One thing that does bother me about this kettle in particular though, is that the base only comes in silver regardless of which color that you decide to get the kettle itself in. For me, I would have preferred if the kettle and the base had a matching color set, but whether or not this bothers you will really be up to the individual's preference. I do think that this is a pretty pleasant looking kettle, and of course, just like the Wilsons, the biggest difference that you can just tell straight out of the box is really just the build quality. On the Fellow EKG, the whole body is much better finished. You don't see any of these seams, and of course, the handle itself on the Fellow EKG is a much more premium material. However, I do find this kettle to be quite comfortable to hold right out of the box, and the spout is slightly shorter than the Fellow EKG. The volume of this kettle is at 0.8 liters, whereas the Fellow EKG is 1 liter. So it's slightly smaller in volume. However, I think this is more than enough for most people. And very quickly, I just want to bring in the Fellow EKG so you guys can have a side-to-side comparison. So again, like I said, straight away out of the box, you can tell really just the sort of the build quality between these two. The Fellow EKG is obviously much more premium built. And in terms of body shape, it's going to be very similar looking as well. And of course, overall with the kettle on the stand, I would say that obviously the EKG is going to have a cleaner, simpler look, but I do quite like the look of the Ovalware as well. Button actually feels a little bit more better built than the Wilsons was before. And in terms of the dial, I think you guys remember me mentioning with the Wilsons, I didn't really like how the dial felt on that unit, and this one actually feels much better. It actually feels just as sort of smooth, enjoyable to turn as the EKG. And now that we have this side by side, one telltale sign that I do find that this is a budget option kettle, which is the handle. While it's not one of those thin, light plastic pieces, however, given that it's something that you kind of hold on a daily basis, having a wood handle like the one on the EKG does just feel that much better. But then again, the EKG with the wood upgrade is going to run you over $180, and this sits comfortably around $50 to $60, depending on if the coupon that I saw is still available when you're watching this video. Next, let's boil some water with both of these kettles and see how they compare. All right, so I went ahead and filled these two up with the same amount of water. Let's test out its most important function, which is obviously boiling water. And I'm gonna turn it on, set the timer, and see if there are any significant difference in terms of boiling speed. All right, let's do it. All right, so both of these kettles got to its target temperature around the same time. The Fellow EKG does have 200 more watts of power. So during the boil, the Fellow EKG did pull ahead at about the midway point. However, what's interesting is that they ended up reaching the temperature at around the same time. But one thing I do notice about the Fellow EKG is that once it gets closer to your target temperature, it does slow down significantly so that it would just land on the exact temperature that you wanted it on. Whereas this, it looks like it would just power all the way through up until you pretty much almost hit the target temperature, and then it will cut off power very shortly and then turn back on for the rest of the way. So that's kind of an interesting observation. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and test to see if it actually did reach the temperature that we wanted it to be at. So right now it's showing 205 for 204. Okay, but I'm gonna go ahead and creak this open just slightly, just so we avoid having as much heat escape as possible. And of course, we're still using my banged up thermometer that I was using for the previous video. All right, so right now on the kettle display is showing 203, and on my thermometer, I'm showing around 200. 201. But please note that, you know, the moment I open the lid, some heat does escape, and that is something that I noticed with the other kettles as well. All right, so let's take a look at the EKG. All right, so very similarly performance-wise, the EKG is definitely a bit more precise as far as this initial observation is concerned. The temperature on the display is showing around 204, 205, it's bouncing back and forth as it's trying to maintain the temperature. And on my thermometer here, it shows 204 and just over 204 point something. And I think the other thing that is worth noting is that the way that the Ovalware tried to maintain this temperature, from the moment that it finished boiling till now, I don't think I ever saw it actually reaching 205. It kind of just bounces around between the 203, 204 range. I'm hearing the heating element turn on, trying to heat up the water, but it's hitting about 204 before it stops, and it dropped back down to 202 again. But let's just double check what's the temperature right now. So right now display shows 202. On the thermometer is showing 200. Yeah, I think definitely this is a very similar situation as the Wilson's, where the reading on the base versus the actual temperature inside the kettle is off about 2 degrees. And now, of course, I'm going to continue to test this kettle over the next several weeks to see if this is a consistent behavior. Because if it is consistent, then at least we know to expect the margin of error and simply dial up the target temperature to be a couple degrees higher. And I think this goes once again to prove that within this price range, I really don't think you can come to the precision of the EKG. All right, so with the boiling test out of the way, let me go ahead and move the EKG out of the way for the moment. And let's talk about some of the functionalities on the Ovalware. So one thing I do like about the Ovalware is the indicator light. So when you have the kettle off and it's in the standby phase, it's just going to show the white ring when it's on. However, when the water is actually boiling, you'll see the ring will turn red, indicating that it's currently boiling. And of course, it's going to say the word heat on the display. I think this is a very nice sort of a visual indication, and I do really appreciate this a lot. With the unit plugged in, I also really like the display. I think this display is quite nice. It's quite bright. It's very sharp. Of course, this is a personal preference, but just like with the Wilson's, I almost prefer this display over that on the Fellow EKG. And of course, there is the hold mode. And with the hold mode on, you will see both the power ring indicator on as well as the hold mode. Now, one downside to this hold mode is that this hold mode will only work for 10 minutes. The Wilson's that we tested previously would hold the water for about 20 minutes before turning off. Just keep in mind this will only work for 10 minutes. So you might potentially run into some issue if you actually boil water and let it sit on the counter for several minutes before you start your actual pour-over. Since in that case, the 10 minutes might not leave enough time for you to finish the pour. But then again, you just gotta pay attention to the status of the kettle and make sure you turn it back on if it does shut off in the middle. And to select between the Celsius and Fahrenheit mode, what you need to do is hold the hold button. You will see the Celsius as well as the Fahrenheit mode blink, and you will use this toggle to switch them back and forth. I actually quite like this as well. Now, of course, there's also the timer mode. Just like with the Wilsons before, as well as the Fellow EKG, I really recommend that you use a separate timer if you have one available. I think everyone should have one available in your phone at least. But if you must use one that is built in, what you need to do is hold the dial for 2 seconds. And you'll see the timer start to run right on the bottom over here. And of course, to restart it, you just go ahead and click it off and hold it again for 2 seconds. Or alternatively, while it's running, you can restart it by simply holding down for 2 seconds. And it will restart again. And besides that function, there's one more thing that's quite interesting about this kettle that I want to test out to see if it makes any huge difference, which is the quick boil mode. Now with the quick boil mode, according to the user manual, it's supposed to run this kettle at full power in order to reach 212 degrees Fahrenheit as fast as possible. The only limitation is that it can only be set to 212 degrees. It will bring it straight up to boil and you cannot change the temperature at all. However, I think this might be useful when you are in a rush in the morning and you just want to get that water boiling as fast as you can. So let's go ahead and test that out to see how much faster it actually is. So I once again filled this up with regular tap water at the same volume as before. And to engage the quick boil mode, you want to go ahead and turn the kettle on. And then, doesn't matter where you set the previous target temperature, you hold the power button for 2 seconds. It's going to make 2 beeps and you will see the target temperature is now 212. So we're just gonna go ahead and test to see how much faster this is versus the normal method. All right, so that took about 4 minutes and 30 seconds. As compared to the normal mode, it does save about 1.5 minutes of actual boiling time. But then again, we are currently at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think for those times when you are in a rush, you can put it on the quick boil mode. And once it's done boiling, you simply set the target temperature back down again. And this way you just move on to do whatever else you need to do and allow the temperature of the water to cool down slightly. All right, so with the function out of the way, the last thing I will do is bring the Fellow EKG back in again. And I want to go ahead and do a test pour with both of these and see how they compare. So as I discussed many times before with the EKG, one of the main selling point of this kettle is how slow and controlled the pour is. This kind of takes away some human error when it comes to pouring your pour-over. Even if you were to use the wrong angle, you really can't pour too fast with this kettle. However, at the same time, that is also its restriction. That means given how slow the actual pour from the EKG is, it's really only suitable for coffee. I think for anything else, you will soon get very frustrated with how slow that kettle pours. All right, so with the Ovalware. Yeah, definitely as expected, just like with the Wilsons, it could definitely pour a lot faster. Oh yeah, this is a lot faster than the EKG. Just like I've discussed previously with the Wilsons kettle, once you use a certain kettle for a while, I think you will get used to how to control the actual pour itself. So for those of you out there that are looking for one kettle that kind of does everything, the Ovalware might actually be the better choice versus the EKG. But for me, I personally bought the EKG just to have a better experience doing specifically coffee pour-overs, and I used a separate kettle to boil tea. However, if you just want to have the one kettle, I think this is quite pleasant to use. Now with that said, there's actually one more thing that I like about the Ovalware that I wish the Fellow EKG does have as well, which is actually the retractable cord. And I think you guys did hear me talk about how I wish the EKG have a retractable cord system. The Ovalware kind of wins for me in this regard. It does have a little retractable kind of, you coil the cord in and you leave just enough as you need. This will actually create a much cleaner counter space since you're having this kettle so close to the wall anyways most of the time. But then again, this is just something small that I personally appreciate and it might not be important for everyone. So I think just at this point, I'm pretty impressed with the Ovalware. Compared to the Wilsons that we discussed from last time, both of these kettles have very, very similar functionalities. And then when it comes to build quality, I do think the base of the Ovalware is slightly better built than the Wilsons. However, the Wilsons kettle did have, I guess, a higher quality feeling handle. Although both this as well as the Wilsons is definitely not as precise as the EKG. However, I'm going to continue to test this kettle over the next several weeks and give you guys a full review down the line. All right, so that's it for this episode. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button down below and of course like and share this video if you find it to be helpful. And as always, please take care and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.